Whoa, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. And in this video, we're going to talk about the second biggest free agent, or you could certainly argue the biggest. I say second because he's a running back. He's not going to get paid as much as the quarterback will. But in terms of the face of the franchise, at least over the last 4 or 5 years, I don't know how proud you are to say that, as bad as the New York Giants have been outside of last year. But the face of the franchise for this New York Giants football team since he's been drafted has been Saquon Barkley. You know, when you talk to other fan bases, the first player that comes to mind when you talk Giants over the last 3, 4, 5 years has been the number 2 overall pick out of Penn State. And obviously, it was a very split decision with New York Giants fans when we ultimately selected Saquon Barkley. And in the end, yeah, I think there is definitely a very valid argument based off of where the franchise currently was that it was not in the best interest of the football team to select the running back second overall. But that's in the past. Now it's about the present. Now it's about building the best possible football team the New York Giants can. And make no mistake about it, last year, Saquon Barkley was a force, especially in the first 9, 10 games of the year. He had a little bit of a drought there where he started to wear down a little bit, and then he kind of came on strong towards the end where they used him a bit more as a pass catcher. But Saquon Barkley is a very, very good football player. Nobody would debate that. A great football player. Obviously, he's had injuries in the past, and obviously, he plays a position that is a short shelf life. A running back is a short shelf life, and Joe Schoen is going to take all these things into consideration. And in this video, we're going to talk about some of the quotes that came out today from Paul Schwartz of the New York Post. Take it for what you will. Could be clickbait season. Obviously, free agency is fast approaching, and as Giants fans, this is all I'm thinking about. Because this is the future of the franchise. I need to know, right? The tag started today. So now teams can start to tag players for the next 2 weeks. March 7th, the tag expires. And the Giants now have 2 weeks to decide not only what they're going to do with Daniel Jones, but what are they going to do with Saquon Barkley. And this is a very rare circumstance. It just is. It almost never happens where the two faces of the franchise hit free agency at the same time. So Joe Schoen has been put to the test, and he could only use the tag on one of them. And ideally, he doesn't want to have to use the tag on either one, right? And I'm sure Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley don't want to have the tag used on them. They want to be fairly compensated. But Joe Schoen, at least when it comes to Saquon Barkley, seems like he's drawn a line in the sand. I'm calm about Jones. Like, I know Jones is coming back. I know people reacted yesterday when they heard the number. And trust me, I didn't like the $45 million number either, as I talked about in yesterday's video. I am confident the cooler heads are going to prevail, and they're going to come to some kind of agreement, which is going to be a number when Jones signs that will not be $45 million per year, but the football world will go bananas. And then I will look at the contract, and I will try to calm myself down, and I will try to compare it to other contracts on a year, on a percentage basis based off the cap. But that's a video for another day. When Jones, I think, ultimately signs the contract, whether it's he's tagged or whether he signed after. Barkley, I'm not so sure on. Barkley, I'm not so sure on. And in this video, I'll talk about the plan B, if we decide to move on from Barkley, and what the New York Giants could potentially do with that vacancy, right? With the money that I guess you could say would be provided to them. Because I think a lot of us as Giants fans going into the offseason said to ourselves, okay, they'll give Jones the 4-year, $36 million per year average contract, and they'll tag Saquon Barkley. So a lot of us accounted for that $10 million against the cap number if they were to sign Saquon Barkley. So what could they do with that money? How could they build up this football team to give Daniel Jones the best chance to continue to grow as a quarterback if they indeed bring him back, as the Giants try to continue to build off of a playoff appearance from last year? Because I think it's very obvious at this point that it's at least possible, especially when you read some of these quotes from Schwartz, that the Giants have drawn their line. And if Saquon Barkley wants to get paid like Christian McCaffrey, not only, at least according to Schwartz, when we pull up these quotes, will the New York Giants not tag him? They're not going to match that money. And if I'm Barkley, as I've said all year, I don't show any ill will towards Saquon Barkley. At the end of the day, Saquon Barkley plays a position where players break down by the age of 29, which is even more of a reason, if you're the New York Giants, that you can't really commit 4 years to this guy. When Christian McCaffrey signed his contract, which I think a lot of people compare it to, And I hope Saquon Barkley gets that money if he leaves the New York Giants. Christian McCaffrey was 23 when he signed that extension. Saquon Barkley's 26 with an ACL tear in his past. So Joe Schoen is not going to give him that kind of money, nor should he. But somebody very well could. The Chicago Bears have $85 million in cap space. They may be looking at Justin Fields and say, wow, Saquon Barkley in that backfield, we could do dynamic things, and they certainly could. But if you're the New York Giants, I think you have to be smart with this contract. And you guys all know if you watch my channel, Saquon Barkley is my favorite New York Giant on this football team. Absolutely love him. And I'll be rooting my ass off for him wherever he goes, as long as it's not with the Dallas Cowboys, Philadelphia Eagles, or Washington Commanders. But I'm starting to come to the realization that it's at least a possibility that he may not be a New York Giant at the start of the 2023 season. I'm not saying that's a definitive thing, and it's very possible that he goes out there, he sees his market, and he says, I'm not going to get much better elsewhere, and maybe he does sign for what Paul Schwartz is saying that Joe Schoen has said is his threshold. And we'll talk about that right now. We'll pull up some of the quotes that came up. This coming out, I think it's Kleiman. He's got a pretty big following on Twitter. And then I'll jump into the actual article regarding Saquon Barkley. Giants running back Saquon Barkley is now considered likely to hit free agency. This to me was kind of speculation when I looked into the Schwartz article, but I'll pull up the quotes. There is still a gap in negotiations between the team and Barkley, per the New York Post. That was Schwartz. Giants aren't likely to pay Saquon more than $12.5 million a year and have little interest in placing the $10.1 million franchise tag on him. This then coming out from Schwartz. First, he talked about Daniel Jones. Jones's presence in the huddle in 2023 is really not up for debate in the minds of general manager Joe Schoen. Reason I'm talking about this is because it relates to Barkley. So he's saying at the beginning of the article that it's not even a debate, at least according to his sources, that Daniel Jones is 1,000% going to be back with the New York Giants. The question is it going to be with a tag? Is it going to be with a multi-year contract? Jones will return for a fifth season as a starting quarterback one way or another. The Giants prefer it to be in a multi-year contract. 5 years is the optimal for the team. That eases the salary cap hit for 2023. 5 years, $190 million is the ballpark. That's $38 million a year on average. That's kind of like right at the top of where I want to go and where I'm like very comfortable with that $38 million number, because there is so many things that they could do with that contract. And we'll talk about it in full extent if Daniel Jones signs a contract similar to that. But that's where he thinks, at least where the New York Giants feel, if they're going to sign Daniel Jones to a multi-year deal, that's where they're at right now. But the fallback of the franchise tag is $32.4 million for the 2023 season is available, though an option neither side wants to see transpire. And I talked about the negative, and we've all talked about the negatives as to what the tag would do for next year's cap. The first day the Giants can use the tag is Tuesday, today, and the last day is March 7th. If necessary, the tag can be used on Jones as a placeholder to keep him off the market. Teams can start to negotiate with free agents March 13th with a longer deal when the longer deal is negotiated. But the tag would mean $32.4 million would be unavailable for the Giants to use, at least initially in free agency, until they worked out the contract. That would put a crimp in Schoen's plans, as tagging Jones would temporarily eat up most of the New York Giants to $44.4 million of cap space. The two sides would have until July 15th to work out a multi-year deal, or Jones would have to play in a one-year deal. Then he went on to say this regarding Saquon Barkley. And when he talks about only having, $12 million, it's going to be hard to sign Barkley, or it's going to be hard to sign other players during the start of free agency. Now, I'm sure they would work it out. If they wanted to bring Barkley back, you could work it out. You can work it out with all these players if your plan is to eventually give Daniel Jones the extension, but it's not ideal when you're thinking about bringing back Barkley, when you're thinking about bringing in outside acquisitions to help build up this football team for 2023. If you have to commit $32.4 million to Daniel Jones against the cap, even if it's temporarily, even if it's only for 2 or 3 months. So I think it's in Joe Schoen's best interest, the New York Giants' best interest, quite frankly, Daniel Jones' best interest, to get a multi-year extension done before the start on March 13th. And I think that's going to be their ultimate goal. As of the latest talks, a gap still exists. The Giants are not going to go higher than an annual average of $12.5 million regarding Saquon Barkley. They could increase their offer as far as guarantees. We don't know what the guarantees are. The Giants have little interest in having Barkley play the 2023 season on the franchise tag for $10.1 million. I'm going to read the rest of this in a second. But that was the part that surprised me, that they have no interest in him playing on the franchise tag for $10.1 million. Because when you look at it, you're like, $10.1 million for a run. I get it. It's a running back. But, I mean, the guy played for, what, $8 million against the cap this year? So I was surprised that they have no interest in doing that. And to me, when I read that, if that's accurate, which we don't know, if Barkley's not willing to sign for a discount, because I do think $12.5 million is a discount with the increasing market. I absolutely think Barkley could get at least $14 million a year on the open market. I don't see Barkley coming back here unless it's for less than what he could potentially get somewhere else. And if they're not going to tag Barkley, he's going to have the opportunity, right? He's going to have the opportunity, if he does not sign this deal before March 13th, to see what his market is. And if you're Barkley, being that you're a running back, being that you're 26 years old, all the things I talked about in the past, that the average running back breaks down around 29, why wouldn't you see what you could get out there on the open market? Now, maybe if the deals are similar, maybe if it's 4 years, 13.5 per, he says, I'd rather stay with the Giants. But if a team knocks his socks off and they give him $16 million per year, similar to a Christian McCaffrey contract, he's gone. That's the way I see it. And my guess would be somebody's going to be willing to give that to him. I'll talk further about that throughout the video, my opinion on the whole situation. Now let's pick it up from the $10.1 million. Because they are unwilling to eat up so much of that cap space on a running back. In the first year of Chubb, he was comparing to Chubb's contract, the running back from Cleveland. In the first year of Chubb's new contract, 2021, his salary cap number was only $4.7 million. So he's saying if they tagged him, it would be almost $6 million more against the cap. So that's why they don't want to do that. That is more in line with what the Giants are thinking for Barkley. So it sounds like with Barkley, take it or leave it, 4 years, $50 million. That's what it sounds like with Saquon Barkley. The guarantees, we don't know. My guess would be a 2-year out. But that's what it sounds like. And it doesn't sound like, at least according to Schwartz, that the Giants are going to tag him. Which tells me if a team is willing to give him $15 or $16 million, he's going to leave. And if you ask me to be honest with you, I think there's going to be a team that's willing to do that. Let's just be real. Saquon Barkley last year proved he's still a top 5 running back in the league. With a team with no help on the outside. You're telling me there's not a team out there, and I don't know who the team is, but there's not a team out there that has a better surrounding offensive roster that looks at Saquon Barkley and says, the Buffalo Bills, for example, I don't know their cap situation, but says, oh my God, could you imagine him in this offense when I got Stephon Diggs on the outside, when I got Josh Allen, when the defense has to pay attention to all these players, similar to how like the 49ers felt about Christian McCaffrey. There's going to be a team out there that convinces themselves that, yeah, we're going to give him $15, $16 million. And if that's the case, and if the New York Giants are not going to tag Saquon Barkley, I don't think Saquon Barkley's going to be back. Now, maybe Barkley's market will be less than I think. Maybe there won't be a team that's willing to give him $14 million a year. And if it's 13.5, even 14, maybe he does come back with the New York Giants for $12.5 million a year. But I think Barkley's going to go for the money, and I can't blame him. And if a team gives him $16 million a year, I think he's out of here. And at that point, you ask yourself as a Giants fan, okay, it sucks, at least for me. I know there's going to be a lot of Giants fans that are happy. And it's nothing against Saquon Barkley. I don't think most people that have wanted to move on from Saquon Barkley for years, it's not because they hate Saquon Barkley. It's because they don't believe in paying a running back that kind of money, which I agree with. I'd be a hypocrite if I told you otherwise, as much as I love Barkley. And I think he's a weapon. And I definitely think he's a guy that if we could get him for $12.5 million with a 2-year out, makes a lot of sense for this team. But when you look at all the other holes on this roster, you'd be lying to yourself if you said, well, you know, it's a good idea to give Saquon Barkley 4 years, $60 million for Joe Shane, because it's not. It's just not. And I think we got to be realistic as Giants fans. So if this happens, and if Saquon Barkley signs somewhere else, what do we do? How do we build up this team? Because you say to yourself, last year, Barkley was the only true weapon that Daniel Jones had. Isaiah Hodgins is a great story. Love Isaiah Hodgins. Thrilled he's going to be back. You hope Wan'Dale Robinson grows. Great story. Could be a really good wide receiver for the New York Giants. But if you lose Barkley, all of a sudden, what do you got with Daniel Jones? And then it's the same story that it's been. And now suddenly you're committed to this guy for 3 years. So what do you do? Well, I think the option that the New York Giants have to take in that case, one, I think you sign a free agent running back, but you're signing a much cheaper free agent running back. I haven't looked at the market, but maybe you get a guy for $4 million a year, $5 million a year. You get a cheap running back that you could bring in here, and you probably use where maybe it's only $2.5, $3 million against the cap. And then you use, maybe a third or fourth round draft pick on a running back. You bring back Breeder, perhaps. I don't know. But obviously, you go more towards a running back by committee approach. And then maybe with that extra $5-6 million, you pair that with a little bit of extra money that maybe you get if you could sign Daniel Jones to this 5-year, $190 million contract if you had void years and you could space this money out. Maybe you make a trade for a wide receiver. You've heard Victor Cruz now on podcasts talking about the possibility of a guy like DeAndre Hopkins. I don't know. If not him, maybe somebody else. But maybe make a trade for a wide receiver with that money. And maybe that's the way that Joe Schoen envisions trying to improve this offense rather than investing that kind of money in Saquon Barkley. But it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. If you would have told me week 5, week 6 that Barkley's not going to be back, I would have said, nah. But I think the fact that Daniel Jones continued to progress as a quarterback, at that point, it hurt the potential to bring back Saquon Barkley because it's hard to bring back both of them. And it's very hard to replace a quarterback. Saquon Barkley is a better player than Daniel Jones, or at least you can make that argument, right? He's one of the best running backs in the league. But quarterbacks do not grow on trees. And in the end, I think if Joe Schoen's got to pick one, he's going to side with the quarterback because he knows he can replace Saquon Barkley. He can get talent at the running back position, especially if he believes in his ability to draft not just running backs, but improving that offensive line. Because if this line gets better, you could have decent running backs. They're going to look good. So that's the way I think he's going to go about doing it. Do I think it's impossible for Barkley to be back? No. I think if Barkley's market is lower than I think it'll be, he could definitely be back. But if a team is willing to give him $15-16 million a year, he's gone. That's the way I see it, unless Joe Schoen comes up his number. But at least according to Schwartz, and according to the reports that we heard at the bye, when Barkley and Schoen were not close, and Schoen came out and said that himself. Like, that's not even speculation. He came out and said that himself, that the numbers were not close. If Barkley won 16, he won't be getting 16 as a New York Giant. That's the way I see it. And if I had to make my prediction right now, I think Jones will be back. Hopefully, I know people say I'm crazy when I say hopefully. I think that deal is reasonable because you could space out the money. 5 years, $185, $190 million. I'm not touching 45. He's not bullying me with that. But hopefully a deal like that. And if you don't bring back Barkley, you go to a plan similar to what I just said. You build up that receiving core. You build up the line. Maybe you get an interior offensive lineman. And unfortunately, Barkley may be a cap casualty. But we'll see how it all plays out in the offseason. I'm still hoping everybody comes back. I hate the salary cap because you lose players that you love. But I think as a fan, you got to realize it's about the team. It's not about the name on the back of the jersey. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.